What's going on, Packer fans? Welcome into the Pack-A-Day podcast. Happy Saturday. Thank you so much for joining me as always. You can always follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL and follow the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. Today we're going to be going over some injury updates for both the Packers and the Bears. Seemingly actually kind of a lot of news that could certainly affect this game. I don't think anything was too earth-shattering or unexpected. Let's go through the Packers injuries first. Matt LaFleur just came out and said in his press conference on Friday that Kevin King is going to be out for this game. We'll discuss the cornerback depth in just a moment, but obviously it feels weird to say a little bit that Kevin King is a big loss for this defense, but Kevin King is a big loss for this defense when you've got Jair Alexander out and, obviously your other corners, Eric Stokes is a rookie, Chandon Sullivan's been up and down, and then it's Isaac Yiadom and Rasul Douglas and so on and so forth, Shamar Jean-Charles. Yeah, Kevin King's injury seems actually pretty big in this game. And of course, one of the, type of players, I'm not saying that, you love the matchup of Allen Robinson versus Kevin King. Allen Robinson's just a really good receiver, right? But that's the type of wide receiver that you have Kevin King for. It's the bigger, more physical wide receivers that maybe aren't going to be quite as fast, and you need somebody with a little bit more size. That's when you bring back Kevin King, you're thinking of the Allen Robinson types as the guys that you want him to be able to match up on. So certainly disappointing that he's not going to be able to play. Dennis Kelly listed as doubtful, still dealing with back issues. It certainly seems like he will not play either. Of course, Malik Taylor goes on the COVID IR list, so he will be out this game. And then the big one that is in question, and it sounds like it will go right up until game time, is Elton Jenkins. He did practice throughout the week in some capacity. Matt LaFleur said it very early in the week that they would love to get Elton Jenkins back this week against this Bears defense. Yet to be seen if that can happen or not. You know that they're going to take this as slow as they need to make sure that he's back 100%. The last thing that you want is to rush back against a really talented defense on, oh, by the way, maybe the worst turf and field in all of football in Chicago. So they're going to be very cautious with Elton Jenkins. It wouldn't surprise me that just based on those things alone, that if they waited another week for Jenkins, brought him back at home. So we'll see what happens there, but this is still a very big decision for Green Bay as to whether or not Elton Jenkins plays in this game. We'll get to why more in just a moment. As far as the Bears side of things, Akeem Hicks listed as questionable. They've got like 12 people, but I'm going to go over the important ones. Akeem Hicks listed as questionable. He did practice on Friday. Khalil Mack, questionable, did not practice on Friday. Allen Robinson, questionable, did practice on Friday. It seems that Allen Robinson's going to be a go. It actually sounds like Khalil Mack, even though he didn't practice all week, it sounds like he is probably going to go in this game. And the actual questionable one, even though he practiced on Friday, is going to be Akeem Hicks. And that is a massive player. Everything that Kenny Clark does for this Packers defensive front, Akeem Hicks is that on the Bears side of things. He's he's the centerpiece of that defense. I know Khalil Mack is the high price guy, the big name guy, but Akeem Hicks is the guy that kind of makes everything else run. He is so important to that defense. Now he's been injured and the Bears defense has still been really good. But of course, if they all of a sudden have Mack and Hicks in their entire arsenal of weapons, for the most part, it just makes everything that much harder. So it'll still be worth keeping an eye on the inactives on Sunday as to which of these players are in fact active and not. But I think when it comes down to it, the big two that you're going to want to watch for are, of course, Akeem Hicks and Elton Jenkins on both sides to see just how, if either of them are active and then when we get into the game, just how effective both of them are. And, with Hicks, does he play a full complement of snaps? Those are all things that are worth watching because both of these players are so incredibly important to their respective teams. As far as call-ups that could happen on Saturday, we could see Ben Braden called up once again. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Certainly if Elton Jenkins and Dennis Kelly are both out, you would think it's a foregone conclusion that Braden would be up in this game. You're probably not super concerned about nuking his, two call-ups this season because eventually you're going to get Bakhtiari and Jenkins back. And, if ever something goes wrong where you have more injuries, you can always just sign Braden to the active roster later. So I don't think you have any real concern there. But I think he's probably a fairly likely one. Even if you only get Elton back and Kelly's still out, still wouldn't shock me, especially with Jenkins coming back from an injury if they called up Braden. So that will be one to look out for. not a call up, but the other, kind of player to keep an eye on is Dominique Daphne. He practiced all week. They opened his window to return from the injured reserve list, and it sounds like he could be ready to go this week. So if they want him to play, of course, they're going to have to activate him, and we'll see if that happens on Saturday. He's low-key a pretty interesting player for this Packers offense. I think for all the talk that Josiah DeGuara was going to be this perfect H-back player, Dominique Daphne's done it much better, and they've almost used DeGuara more as a true tight end, I would almost say, whereas Daphne really was playing that fullback, H-back, a little bit of tight end. He's playing really well on special teams. He's a good player for this team and underrated, I think, at this point. So I'm not saying Dominique Daphne is going to change the outcome of Bears-Packers, but he's a nice player to have, especially against a really tough Bears defense. And anytime you can improve at a position, in this case, H-back, fullback, it's a positive. It's a net positive. And I think Dominique Daphne brings that to the table. So we'll see if he's able to play, and that'll be another one to kind of keep an eye on. I think the most important question here with Kevin King being out, and as I kind of alluded to earlier, is the depth at cornerback. And as we mentioned, Jair Alexander out, Kevin King out. It's going to come down to Eric Stokes, Chandon Sullivan, and I would be shocked if it's not Isaac Yiadom starting as the outside corner and in the third corner. Now, they will have to decide in maybe a couple base scenarios. Are you going to go Chandon on the outside, or do you still want to go Yiadom? For the most part, there's very few base snaps, so it doesn't matter all that much, but that will be one question that needs to get answered because Chandon is, of course, more of a slot inside corner. But I would expect, again, Stokes and Yiadom to be the boundary corners with Sullivan in the slot. I would expect Douglas to be the number 4 guy, or I should say Douglas to be the top backup on the outside with Shamar Jean-Charles the top backup on the inside. I don't think it's entirely out of the question that Quinton Dunbar could get activated for this game. I don't think he would have a true role. The same could be said for KB Anento, especially if they need another special teams player with Malik Taylor being out. Not necessarily because of the depth at corner, but it would be nice to have a corner who does know the defense and can play special teams, and those sort of things. So we'll see. When Matt LaFleur talked about it, he brought up Douglas, Shamar Jean-Charles, Yiadom, and Dunbar. He did not bring up KB Anento, so I think that's probably pretty good writing on the wall that Ento is probably not going to get called up. But, for me, this is going to come down to probably Yiadom on the outside, and I think what they're probably going to do is play a lot of zone, which they've been playing, but a lot of off coverage for Yiadom too. Yiadom's fast, he's quick. He can get up from point A to point B very quickly, and I think they're just going to want to make sure that Darnell Mooney or Allen Robinson doesn't get past him, and Justin Fields is able to take a shot play down the field one-on-one with Isaac Yiadom. I think if there's one thing Green Bay is going to want to prevent, it's that. I think Yiadom's going to want to keep everything in front of him and make sure that doesn't happen. And if you're going to give up some completions here and there, that's fine. Yiadom's a pretty good tackler, and coming up and being able to tackle in those scenarios is going to be key. But I would expect them to be a bit more cautious, maybe play a bit more off coverage and really kind of play to Isaac Yiadom's strengths a little bit more. It's certainly still a concern, right? Now, there may not be a better team in football that you'd rather go against if you're down your top 2 corners than top 2. We can argue that, but Jair, you're 1, and then still Kevin King, who would be a starter. Those 2, then the Chicago Bears. And the reason I say this, they just don't throw the ball a ton, and you still have, of course, a rookie quarterback in Justin Fields that's still kind of learning everything. So we'll see just how important it is, but if on those plays that they are going to throw, they're probably important down in distance. They're going to be shot plays. They're going to be schemed up stuff that they're going to probably try to attack certain areas of the field, aka Isaac Yiadom or who's ever playing that final outside corner spot. And then on the other side, it's going to be up to Stokes to really play a strong game because he becomes the number 1 corner. Sorry, kid, the training wheels are off. You are the de facto number 1 corner on this team right now. That means probably going up against Allen Robinson quite a bit. And if not, you're going to be matched up against Darnell Mooney. Those are 2 very good wide receivers. So I think it will be an interesting dynamic of how much Matt Nagy wants to attack those corners versus how much he wants to kind of, take it easy on his quarterback and run the football. But the whole dynamic here is so interesting. So let's just kind of back out and take a 1,000-foot view of this, right? So we know that Matt Nagy's going to want to run the ball a ton in general, especially with Fields at quarterback and not make him throw, 30 plus times a game. but no David Montgomery, no Tariq Cohen, Damian Williams goes on COVID IR. They're left with Khalil Herbert and Ryan Nall at running back. So they don't have their full complement of running backs. Their offensive line's not very good as pass protectors or run blockers. So do you want Fields? If I'm coaching in this situation, I probably want Fields to be the guy that's going to make the magic happen, because I'm not going to. I actually like Khalil Herbert. I actually like Ryan Nall a little bit as well, but I'm not probably trusting this game in their hands and in the hands of my not so great offensive line. If anyone's going to make something magical happen and maybe make some big plays, it's going to be Justin Fields. So it's going to be this interesting dynamic, especially when Green Bay's down their corners in this game. So while we would probably expect, and I kind of still expect, Chicago to go run heavy in this game, I think you can argue that their best bet is actually to throw quite a bit and maybe do some easier stuff, screens, underneath stuff, just to see if Green Bay's defense can communicate. And again, with a new corner in there, but it's going to be a really interesting dynamic to see what this Bears offense decides to do. So I think that's going to be worth keeping an eye on. I think the next thing is, how do they utilize Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn if they are in the game? So you're probably going to have Khalil Mack, if he is active, lined up on the left-hand side, Robert Quinn on the right-hand side. Quinn's playing really good football right now. If you're Green Bay, if Mack's out, I know that they're not kind of playing against each other, but if Mack's out, they're not going to know until the inactives, but it's almost to a point where, like, if Mack's out, maybe you don't need Elton Jenkins in this game. And if Mac's in, you would really love him in this game. I know they're not going to have, be privy to that information ahead of time unless they get word of something. And they're probably going to make the decision just simply based on Elton Jenkins' health. But just how healthy Khalil Mack is and if Elton Jenkins can play is going to go such a long way in the pass protection in this game. The Bears can get after the quarterback. You know that. I don't need to tell you that. And if Quinn and Mack and Akeem Hicks are all active and ready to go, this is going to be a big game for this Packers offensive line. And, it's interesting because Yosh Nijman, I think, is outpaced anyone's expectations for him, right? But I do think that there's this kind of thought process or this kind of feeling that goes through fans where you expect the worst so much that anything positive that Yosh gives you, you're super happy about. The truth is that Yosh has still been slightly below average these past couple weeks, if not below average for a normal offensive tackle. Now, that is not a knock on Yosh. He has far exceeded any expectations up to this point. They're 2-0 with him as the starting left tackle. He has grinded and to get to the point where he's at today. He has made himself into a bona fide swing tackle where you can trust him to come in games. But there is still a massive difference between Yosh and Elton Jenkins at left tackle. So if you can get Jenkins in going against Robert Quinn, Khalil Mack in this Bears front, it is a huge, huge advantage for Green Bay. Again, we'll keep an eye on it as the inactives come out on Sunday, but that's definitely going to be one to see is just how healthy is Mack, how healthy is Jenkins, does he play, and how do those matchups go. The good news for Green Bay along the offensive line is Josh Myers returns. I think this is going to be fairly simple for Green Bay. Matt LaFleur mentioned they kind of moved some pieces around in practice this week, but it feels, in essence, Josh Myers will take over at center for Lucas Patrick. I would expect Newman still to be at right guard, Turner to be at right tackle. I would expect John Runyon to be at left guard, and then the left tackle position would come down simply to, if Jenkins is healthy, he plays. If he's inactive, then it would be Yosh at left tackle. I don't think it needs to get any more complex than that. They could, move some pieces around. Maybe they feel really good about Yosh and want to move Elton inside against Akeem Hicks or something. They could. Matt LaFleur's very adamant about best five on the field. To me, that's Elton at left tackle and still Royce Newman at right guard, and the rest of things stay in status quo if that's the case. But you never know. So I think another thing to keep an eye on is just how that offensive line lines up on Sunday. That is going to do it for me today and the injury update. I'll be right back here tomorrow on Packers game day for a preview show, kind of breaking down the game. Usually it's 12, maybe it's less, maybe it's more, but my keys to the game as well as my prediction for the game. So make sure to check that out tomorrow and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for listening. Always appreciate it. Enjoy your weekend. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.